Okay, we'll call the Town Plan and Zoning Special Meeting Thursday, March 23rd to order. First order of business, Pledge Allegiance. Would you please stand?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Secretary read the roll.
Chairman Rita.
Here.
Commissioner Camillo.
Here.
Commissioner Claffey. Commissioner Meyer.
Here.
Commissioner Payne.
Here.
Commissioner Sarah.
Here.
Commissioner Sobieski.
Here.
Commissioner Metallica. Commissioner Leander.
Okay. Approval of the agenda. Turn it over to Town Planner. We have some changes to the agenda.
Okay, this is, right, yeah. Tonight is a special meeting, so by law, we can't add anything to the agenda, but a couple items that were not on the agenda originally came to my attention earlier this week, and so they were added to the agenda and filed with the town clerk yesterday. If members of the audience picked up a copy of the agenda on the table, you have the current agenda with the new items. Commissioners, if you noticed, there was an agenda when you sat down tonight that has two items on it that weren't on the agenda that you got in the mail. One is the discussion of the open space zone. I frankly forgot to put it on the agenda. And the other addition is we received an application just today from a nonprofit group, Canine Crime Stoppers. They raised money to purchase bulletproof, as I understand it, bulletproof vests for police dogs. They want to have a wine tasting fundraiser next month, but they need to get a special permit from the commission to do that. And I discussed it with the chairman, and he agreed to add it to the agenda to be received tonight and scheduled for your next meeting. I don't know much about them. Their application is on the table. It just arrived today, so when you take a look at it, if you want to tonight, you'll know more about them than I do, because there's a description of them in there. So that's the other item that's on the agenda that was not in your package when you got it earlier this week.
Okay. Next item is public participation for items not listed on the agenda. Anyone wishing to speak at this time, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Okay, seeing none. Remarks by commissioners. Anything you want to bring up at this point? Okay. There are no public hearings. Next item is approval of minutes, March 8th, 2017.
Make a motion to approve. Second.
Motion made and second. Any additions or corrections? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next item on the agenda is new business, Newington Junction TOD Overlay District Text Amendment and Map Amendment, new section 3.19B, TPZ applicant contact. I'll turn it over to the planner.
All right. This item was more than tabled previously by the commission. I think pretty much the original version was put to bed, and then the commission starting over again, and they're taking a step back and revisiting the whole regulation. So at the last meeting, I was asked to put some comments to paper and include some additional maps, and we can talk about this some more, and we will. But I wanted to make raise four comments about the purpose of the TOD regulation, and forgive me if I read it. The first comment is about incentives. If CT Fast Track ridership increases in the coming years, it's reasonable to expect local landowners will want to redevelop their property in ways that capitalize on this. Roughly 4/5 of the triangle formed by Willard Avenue, CT Fast Track Guideway, and the West Hartford Town Line is industrial zoned, and the rest is residential, except for one B-zone parcel next to the CT Fast Track station. The purpose of the TOD Overlay District is to encourage mixed-use development that benefits the whole community and not just the landowners. The TOD regulation does this in several ways. One, it permits uses that are not allowed in the underlying zone. Two, it allows a reduction in parking. And three, it allows development at densities not allowed in areas that are not near a transit node. The second point I want to make is the underlying zoning. Landowners who do not want to do TOD won't have to. The underlying zoning will still be in effect. Number three, voluntary. Landowners who do not want to develop their land to redevelop their land won't have to. I expect that some owners or developers will buy or obtain options on land from their neighbors to create larger sites that are suitable for TOD. But again, this will be completely voluntary. There will be no eminent domain. Number 4, buffering. The current requirement for a buffer area at least 25 feet wide in section 6.10.5 will apply. All TOD applications will require a public hearing, so there will be ample protection for abutting property owners. And then in the packet, I also, that the commissioners got, I included a map which shows the area that's being considered by the commission at this point. And the coloring, the green is industrial, the khaki, whatever, is R12. These dark blue are Willard Avenue overlays, which allow basically for protection of those historic houses. But the underlying zone there is R12, and then finally one little blue business parcel. So as you can see, it's mostly industrial zone. And then, well, I won't flip to that now, but there's an aerial photograph of the area, which I can go to if the commissioners want to during their discussion. At the last meeting, I suggested the commission consider doing a site walk, because I know the commissioners were concerned about the possibility of assembling parcels, and where would new streets go if some developer wanted to propose a new street. So I think a site walk would be a good idea. And that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, any commission remarks? Bob?
Just a point of record, on the handout we have when the town planner was going over the numbers, comments is number 1, number 2 is missing, underlying zone is 3, voluntary is 4, and buffering is 5.
Oh, the numbering got thrown off when I.
Yeah, no problem, just point of record, just want to correct it, that's all.
Thank you, yep.
Stanley?
Quick question. Will that be enough to keep the noise away from the residential areas, the 25-foot buffering?
I think it would depend on the specific application.
What I'm referring to basically is you would several times suggest maybe mixed use like restaurant or something like that. I know I have property in that area, so there's other people, and we can hear the police when they shoot, which is well over a mile away. And the residents did express, they lived up on Brook Street and Magnolia Street, expressed some concern about music and stuff at night, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, whenever the bar licenses allow. So my question is this enough, or do we need to maybe add some more to it, or some other type of buffering?
Well, I think 25 feet would not be enough for some uses, such as a restaurant. And the regulation does say that, or implies that 25 feet is the minimum. The commission can always, if it feels warranted on a case-by-case basis, require more buffer. Again, that's the benefit of the public hearing, is you'll be able to have that input from the public about their concerns. You'll be able to talk to the applicant about how you feel more than 25 feet might be appropriate. You might get an application that you feel flat out is just not compatible with the neighborhood, and therefore you might feel that you're not able to approve it. That's certainly possible.
Okay. Mike, you got anything? Chris?
Your noise constraints should be able to be limited to inside venue entertainment, and they're subject to the same rules as everybody else for 10 o'clock curfews.
One more thing, if I may.
Yes.
Along those same lines, while we're looking at noise, also lighting, because there is a residential area, buildings have lighting off the back for whatever reason. We want to make sure that's not going to affect the residents either. So we may need something in there for that.
I think we have that in our zoning regulations now. Am I correct?
Yes, we do require that a light plan be submitted with all site plans, but that could be something that you would look at more carefully in one of these applications than you have been in the past.
Right. Well, the reason why I bring it up, we did have an issue recently where the Citgo station on the Berlin Turnpike did some relighting, and it was affecting the residents in the back, and they had come forward with it. That's why I bring it up.
Very good. Thank you.
Anyone else? Tom?
Mr. Chairman, a few meetings ago, we asked you to contact the train people for some information on the other side. Do we have any new information on that?
Well, we don't have any new information. I did contact DOT, and initially they seemed willing to come to a commission meeting, but then they backed off on that. I'm not really sure why.
can you try one more time? It would be nice if we could maybe group everything all together and get it over with and figure it out. You know, we understand that maybe things are gonna change a little bit, but maybe they could give us a little insight on it.
Okay.
We're not expecting to have a final design or anything.
Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah, see what you can do. Thank you.
Yep.
What's your thoughts on the site visit as a commission?
Maybe do that on a weekend, a Saturday, or I just think if we tried to do it before a meeting, we may get a little too rushed.
Agree with that. Weekend sounds good, Saturday or something.
Let's wait until the snow melts so we can walk around. And when's our next meeting?
April 13th.
We'll set it up at that meeting. We'll set it up probably for the following weekend.
Okay.
We'll pick a date
Right.
that's convenient for most of us, and then
Okay.
Okay. Anything else you want to add, Mr. Planner?
Nope.
Nothing else from the commissioners on this at this point? I think we really have to get out there and take a look at what's the lay of the land there and get some ideas of the residential portion and the portion behind the residence that's in the industrial zone it's an industrial zone. Yeah. Go ahead.
If I could, Mike, is it possible if you know some of the owners over in that area so that we won't get in trouble for walking on their land? Maybe we can prearrange it, so.
I'll figure out a time and date.
Okay.
Go say hi.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda, changes to zoning regulations adopted in 2017, Mr. Planner.
Okay, the document that was in your package, which I mailed a few days after the last month or the earlier meeting this month, only covered the first couple of regulations that have waiver language. I've been working on it since then. The version that's on the table when you sat down tonight goes into a lot more detail with some of the other regulations, which I was able to get to since last week. I'm going to open it up on the screen here so the audience can see what we're talking about.
So, if I may.
Go ahead.
So you filled in more of the, criteria and purposes since we've seen it last.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. That's the wrong one.
There's a,
Okay.
there's a few that there's quite a few that still have, no purpose, no criteria. If there's something after we read it, if we can come up with something, we can present it to you next meeting.
Yes, but what I did was I created a purpose and a criteria for most of them, the first 3 pages of them, and then where there's a dashed line, that's as far as I got.
Oh, okay.
But that's all new. That's all content that you haven't seen until now. So would the commission like to go over them?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Okay, the first one is 3.12.85, which deals with the town center overlay district. Right now, the regulation simply reads, the minimum frontage and lot area may be modified by the commission when it determines the development project is compatible with the surrounding properties, adds to a block of buildings that create a strong street edge, and creates a street level storefront. Actually, this does contain pretty much what we need to withstand a challenge. It does have a specific purpose to facilitate their improvements, and it does have specific criteria. A finding by TPZ that the proposed project is compatible with surrounding properties. It must, quote, add to a block of buildings that create strong street edge, end quote, and it must, quote, create a street level storefront, end quote. So that's pretty much okay the way it is. The next one is the buffer regulation in the PD zone. And actually this same language appears in a lot of other zones. But the problem is that we require a 25-foot buffer, but then the regulation goes on to say, let's see, in the middle, no, the last sentence. A buffer meeting the requirements of 6.10 is required whenever the uses adjoin a residential zone unless waived by the commission pursuant to section 6.10.5. So there's really no purpose stated here and there's no criteria. So I'm suggesting that the purpose be, the purpose of this waiver is to allow development in the buffer area where the land use, landscaping or architecture in the adjacent residential zone is such that its residential character will not be impacted by the development in the buffer area, or where severe topography on either side of the zone boundary will provide sufficient buffering. And then criteria to be eligible for waiver would be significant natural or introduced vegetation, severe topography, or the specific design or location of buildings in the adjacent residential zone. So an applicant would have to have these criteria to be eligible for a waiver.
I
thought that had to go to the ZBA for a waiver.
That's why we're doing this, so that they wouldn't have to go to the ZBA. You would have the authority to approve waivers as long as it meets this stated purpose and as long as it complies with the specific criteria.
Even with that court case?
Exactly. This is consistent with that court case. This is consistent with the Santa Sierra court case, which came out after the one, which is the case that came out later and clarified what zoning commissions can do as far as waivers and modifications are concerned.
I think that probably the first decision by the court when it first came down overstepped, was too broad stroke, and it overstepped into areas where that they had to clarify.
Right, and that's what the second decision did, which actually involved the same judges as the first one. So, okay, the next one is my favorite. The principal building within 50 feet of a wetland. The regulation currently reads that no principal building shall be placed or constructed within 50 feet of a regulated inland wetland or watercourse, as shown on maps entitled Designated Inland Wetlands and Watercourses of the Town of Newington, or on a detailed soils map, certified by a soil scientist and approved by the Newington Conservation Commission. This setback standard may be modified upon the receipt of a favorable report from the Conservation Commission and a 2/3 vote of the Commission. I previously recommended TPZ delete this entire regulation because it's redundant. By state law, the Newington Conservation Commission must issue a permit before any building can be constructed within 50 feet of a wetland or watercourse. A Conservation Commission permit is a favorable report. This regulation creates no additional safeguards and is an unnecessary bureaucratic delay.
Stanley.
What happens if somebody backfills in that wetlands?
They can't. That would be against the law.
So in other words, there is an ongoing issue on Day Street now where somebody's backfilled within the wetlands, and that's supposedly under the Wetlands Commission?
It is.
All right.
And if they determine that there's been a violation, they'll take action.
Which property is that?
I'm not
The
sure.
one up at the end of Day Street Extension where the contractors come in and dump millings and built it up about 20 feet above the original level.
Close to the brook.
Yeah, it's very near the brook. The other issue I have is the question of clear cut. Would that not be in this area also?
Yeah.
The reason I'm asking is because several pieces of property have been clear cut in the last couple of years, and nobody seems to have any handle on what's going on with it.
Well, this regulation doesn't deal with clear cutting anyway. This regulation only deals with the placement of principal buildings.
Okay.
All right, let me go on to the next one. The commission doesn't need to take any action on these tonight, but
No, we'll
Yep.
go over them, but I think you might be right on that.
okay, the next one, parking. Paragraph J in the parking regulations says that these regulations may be modified by the commission where circumstances relating to the peculiar and exceptional nature of the uses are such that the specific requirements of the parking regulations do not apply, or where the commission finds that an alternative standard or arrangement will be satisfactory. And this is now my comment. There are a lot of different parking lot requirements in this section, see below. A blanket modification provision that contains specific purposes and specific criteria is not possible. I could draft purpose and criteria statements for each, but that would take a while, and I don't think it would be a good use of my time, since I don't think we have received any modification requests in the 5 years that I've been here. And these are the regulations that would require a special, a unique condition requirement and criteria. A, parking requirements. B, parking spaces for buildings. Well, I won't read it, but as you can see, there are a lot of very different requirements, and creating a purpose statement and specific criteria for each one would be rather burdensome. I mean, I'll do it. And if there are any of these that the commission does think or do think that it's likely we might get a waiver request, I can do it. But like I said, in 5 years, we haven't had any requests, so I'm not sure it would really be necessary, but I would if the commission feels it's warranted. And then we go on to removal of earth products, which is by special permit. So right now, under paragraph B, the plan shall provide for proper the plan shall provide for proper drainage of the area after completion. No bank shall exceed a slope of 1 foot of vertical rise in 2 feet of horizontal distance. No removal shall take place within 50 feet of a property line, except when modified by 2/3 vote of the commission. So I'm suggesting that we add a purpose statement to this waiver language, and the purpose would be, the purpose of this waiver is to allow removal of earth products within 50 feet of a property line where such removal will not impact the adjacent property. And I'm suggesting the criteria be that there be no improvement or planned improvement on the adjacent property within 50 feet of the property line. So in other words, there's nothing on the house side of the property line. There's no house, there's no garage, there's nothing within the first 50 feet. If there's nothing within the first 50 feet on the other side, and the homeowner indicates that they don't plan on doing anything, the commission could, if the applicant asks, modify the 50-foot buffer. 50 feet. 50 feet buffer on the developed side. Okay, the next waiver is paragraph C. At the conclusion of operations, the whole area where removal has taken place shall be covered with not less than 4 inches of topsoil and seeded with suitable cover crop. This requirement may be modified by the commission where no practical purpose is accomplished by adherence to it. And my observation is, the only reason I can think of for this waiver is when the area left exposed after the removal operation is completed is ledge or bedrock. I suggest replacing the waiver sentence with, this requirement shall not apply to exposed area that is ledge or bedrock. And then the next one under the removal of earth material section is no equipment not required for actual removal of the material shall be allowed. The processing of earth product is prohibited except when permitted by the commission and approved by a 2/3 vote. And my comment is, there are times when processing earth products on site makes sense, such as when rock that needs to be removed can be converted into gravel that is needed for the project. It reduces the amount of truck traffic to and from the construction site, and it saves the developer money. Since the removal of earth products already requires a special permit, which requires a public hearing, need for the activity, character of the neighborhood, safeguards to protect adjacent property, etc., there's no need for a total ban on processing earth products. I suggest that processing of earth products be made a separate special permit activity. So in addition to whatever other permit someone needs to get, for example, a quarrying operation or something else, they would also have to get a special permit specifically to crush the gravel or whatever it is that they would like to be able to do at that location. Mr. Chairman, you have a question?
No.
You know you have a question.
No, go ahead.
I thought this was put in here to stop the fact of somebody going in, doing quarrying here and just using it as an excuse to take rock out of here. I seem to remember it happened a couple spots in town where the Dunkin' Donuts is now, where that was blasted out, rock was sold. And I know that was something up there, that there was a big discussion with Toll Brothers. All right, I think that's why this was put in here, to stop them from selling the rock to the quarry company. I think we should really look at that before we start taking things out on that. Because I don't want to wind up having, if something gets developed and there's that rock up there, Bacillus rock, all of a sudden that thing's worth a lot of money. And I certainly don't want to see something getting blasted out again, thrown with a bunch of fill in there and covered up.
Right. That's
my concern here.
Right, and you may very well be right. I know when I was in Cromwell, there were some concerns that a proposed subdivision was just a stealth attempt to mine all of the topsoil. Um, you never really know. I mean, yes, it might be. I can say though that if you did this, the applicant who was planning on selling the processed material would still have to convince you that that there's a need for the activity, that it won't impact the character of the neighborhood, that the adjacent properties will be protected. That's a pretty high burden to meet. So I would think this would give the neighbors sufficient protection and would still allow the town to approve the operations where it did make sense. And I'm thinking more like a street, a subdivision where the developer wants to build a road and needs to blast some ledge to build the road, and then we need to bring in gravel afterwards to build the road. It just makes sense to allow him to crush up the rock on site and make it into gravel with appropriate sound safeguards and dust safeguards and all the usual, not usual, but all the appropriate safeguards. And again, on a case-by-case basis, only after there's been a public hearing on just that aspect of the project and approved by the commission.
I just want to make sure that somebody doesn't try to backdoor this into some type of quarrying operation. That's my only concern here.
And then, let's see, one more. Oh yes, under the stormwater management regulation. Excuse me. Unless modified by the commission, every application shall provide for a stormwater management system, including low-impact development techniques as specified in the section. And my comment is, I recommend simply deleting the phrase, unless modified by the commission. The LID and Stormwater Manual already contains the very forgiving phrase, quote, to the maximum extent practicable. So there really is no need for the zoning regulations to contain even more relief. And I can tell you, because I work closely with the town engineer, he has been very reasonable with site plan applicants in allowing them to proceed with a project that shows only as much LID as the soil, as the property can support. So there doesn't really need to be, in my opinion, any waiver language.
That's good to hear, because the soils here in Newington, as everybody knows, are mostly clay, and that type of LID is very difficult to do in a clay situation. There's some gravel areas.
Right.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, and that's as far as I got. So
Okay, we'll get that back on and we'll review the rest next meeting.
okay.
Next item on the agenda, open space zone, proposal by Open Space Committee. People here want to come forward and sit at the table and give us some updates on what you're working on, how we could help. Okay.
We've got 1, 2, 3.
Just state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Bernadette Conway, the Chair of the Open Space Committee. Carol Wojtowicz, Vice Chair, Open Space Committee.
Gail Bedrago, member of the Open Space Committee and Town Council.
Carol Annis, member of the Town Council, and member of the Open Space Committee.
Where are we with this?
Well, there's a revised draft on the table. I emailed it to the commission earlier this week, but there's also a hard copy on the table, and also stapled to the revised regulation is the proposed memorandum of understanding that was also discussed.
We took into consideration all of the recommendations you made. Thank you for all of your input, and did so as outlined by Craig here. Added into the first recommendation was section 3.25, adding or such a parcel that belongs to a land trust or nature conservancy. And the second recommendation being the addition to 3.25.3.2, buildings that support the primary use of the property and whose area does not exceed 10% of the open space parcel. And that's in addition to the memorandum of understanding that Vice Chair Payne recommended. So Mr. Minor put that together, the memorandum of understanding.
Any of the other members wanna speak to this? Carol? Gail?
Hear your comments.
No, I mean, you covered the areas that we had questions with, and I'll open it up to the commissioners. You've read this, would you like to proceed? Stanley, anything? Go ahead.
I think this is a very good, I was just reading, I think it's very good. My only concern is I'd like to make sure the regulations are nice and tight, so we can't have, and I'm gonna give you an example. You have no pond over here, and you have a pump house, you have the changing rooms, you have facilities. That's all that should be in there, and a small storage area for chemicals. I don't wanna see some backdoor way of putting in a garage for a lawnmower over there, and then turning that into an office for somebody out there. We don't need that. That's why I'd like to get this, this is a good start, but I wanna make sure that that gets tightened up a little bit in there. You know, again, this is a small town, it's 13.7 square miles. They drive or truck the lawnmower and equipment supplies back and forth. So other than that, I think it's a good idea. I don't want to see anything built on any public property here. Thank you.
Anyone else, Mike? Chris? You're all set with it? Dominic, got questions?
Is it possible that we could include a list of properties in the regulation?
I know when we submitted this on the cover page, it did submit the list of all the properties that we had intended to be covered under this open space zone. So that was in the cover letter. And do you mean just adding it listed in the actual zone?
I'm wondering if we should have a list somewhere in there that lists the properties, so that it's in there, and then it could be updated periodically.
No, we totally agree, and I think one of the beauties of doing this is that in the 2020 Plan of Conservation, what was confusing to the public initially was that there was a mission and vision and message in the 2020 Plan of Conservation about, preserving open space, the character of the community, whatever, and the land maps reflected in the 2020 actually seemed to reflect that, because there were the town parks are designated as open space, but in reality, it's not really a zoning change. So this will bring the 2020 Plan of Conservation into consistency with actually the land regs. And as such, this doesn't make any change to any usage of any current piece of land in Newington. It's the parks that we're talking about. So listing those parks, I think, will give a level of maybe more comfort to the fact that we're not going to be doing any kind of eminent domain or changing any other kind of zoning regs, but it's protecting and preserving what we have now. And then if we acquire other pieces, we can change the zoning.
You think that's appropriate to put into a regulation, a list of properties that it affects?
Excuse me, in principle and concept, yes. But the way to actually do it might get tricky. We could do it maybe two ways. One, we could reference the map in the 2020 plan, but use language that says something like shall substantially be in conformance with that map, because the town can has acquired land since then, and we wouldn't want someone to stand in the way because on a technicality that it wasn't in there. So if I could use some
Reference back to
reference it,
something
but
else.
not be absolutely bound to parcels on the 2020 plan map.
The list could also, you could have two categories. You could have the dedicated open space, and then the managed open space, and then you could have, you're not considering the community facilities institutional, like the school areas, to be open space. Okay. So we have two categories there, because the managed open spaces, I think there's only one. There might be two, but it's only, Eddie's Farm would be a managed open space.
I don't know if you want to list them. I think you'd be better off referring back to a map in the 2020 plan, because if that gets revised, it'll always be up to date, because it'll have the properties on it. So we don't have to keep revisiting this every time there might be a change. So I like that idea. Why don't we incorporate that into this?
The 2020 plan.
Yeah,
Yeah,
incorporate that into this regulation. Where
Okay.
would you put that as a new item on?
I'll think about it,
Figure it
I'll
out,
sleep
right?
on it and come up with something. Right.
Okay.
Now, do you want the open space committee to come back with a revised draft that includes what you just asked for, or are you satisfied with?
I think you come up with the revision,
Okay.
because everything else here we agreed with. No use in belaboring it. And you come up with show us the language, and then we'll proceed. We'll take a.
Okay.
What do we have to do? Have a public
Well, it's got
hearing?
to, right, the usual 30 days in advance has to be filed with, copy has to be filed with CROG.
The next meeting, when you have this one complete, we'll schedule a public hearing. And we'll do the public hearing, and we'll act on it, and then I will sign this memorandum of understanding. Yes.
On 3.2532, which buildings that support the primary use of the property and whose area does not exceed 10% of the open space. The only problem I have is with that 10%, that might not, maybe it would be.
We were thinking about Indian Hill.
Exactly
We
what
asked,
I was thinking.
and Craig said that it was within those limits.
Okay.
Well, I'm thinking the clubhouse, it's a big building, but it's not 10%.
There's 3 buildings there, though.
Oh, and you're thinking the aggregate they might?
There's the big one, there's 2 other facilities for management.
Garage or something.
The garage is back there, but there's a lot of land there, so I don't think it'll be over 10%.
That was my assumption.
But I would
I'll
double check.
No
Okay.
way that's over.
Okay, I'll double check that.
Okay.
You looked into that then?
I will.
Yeah, and we,
Yeah.
Okay.
When we, came up with that 10%.
right, because I had researched, other zoning regulations throughout the country. And, most of them for open space within a small community did mention some kind of space percentage, and 10% seemed to be the common.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so just to clarify what the commission wants, you want the committee to revise the draft with my assistance, obviously, to include this 2020 map language. Once we've done that at their next meeting, do you want it to come back to you again before scheduling for a public hearing, right?
Yeah, so we
That's
can
what I
see
thought.
what
Okay.
you
That's what I
did,
thought.
but we
Okay.
could do the review and the scheduling at the next meeting.
Yes.
So we don't keep
Yes.
this thing going for 20 years.
Right, because your committee is meeting between now and April 13th, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Okay.
Carol, you got something else?
Yeah, I had a couple of things. When you were talking about listing the map, you guys definitely picked up what I picked up, because we're also incorporating land trust and nature's conservancy. So at any given time, they could be purchasing land in this town as well. So to try to keep up with it, I think would just be a nightmare. And then you would have to revise your regulations to include that. You might want to incorporate it for the town-owned land in the MOU and do an appendix to that. So there is an understanding between the 3 bodies that these are the properties that we're talking about. That might be an alternative, and that would kind of
Make the list part of
the MOU.
part of this, right?
Yeah, and that would give it a little bit more teeth.
Yeah, that's good. Why don't you come back with a revised, work with the planner and he'll revise it.
And then
Bring it back.
I just want to address, Stanley, your concern with the buildings. You have to remember, TPZ has the 824. So you have a right, if it doesn't follow your plan of development, then you can throw it back at the council. So you do have a little bit of oversight on what is going to be built on the properties and not. So you have a little bit of stuff, even though the council can override you. You have to remember that.
No, I understand it, Carol. Thank you. I just didn't want to have another debacle of Mill Pond again. That's all I was concerned with.
Go ahead.
Just one other question I have for you. On 3.25.31, where you have golf courses, cemeteries, and burial grounds, do you really want to keep the cemeteries and burial grounds in there or not? Have you gone over that in detail? I just, because in the 2020 plan, they're listed as historical sites. They're not listed as open space, and I just wasn't sure that those should be really in there. If you could give it some thought.
Actually, one of the things, again, we did pull from other zoning regulations throughout the country, but I do know that people do walk through the cemeteries, and actually I was thinking more in terms of, Cedar Hill on top of the mountain. It is really used as recreation, whatever. And at some point, I mean, I know I do walking. I've seen people biking through West Hill Cemetery. So I think there is, and we don't have big monuments. So I think it is consistent. But we will talk about it at our next open space
Appreciate
meeting.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Carol, go ahead.
Right now, Craig, how is Center Cemetery, West Meadow, and those little burial grounds, how are they zoned? Do you know?
Underlying zones,
Right, and I didn't bring my zone book.
like the one on the corner of Church Street and.
Yeah, what's the underlying
and
zone
Payne
there?
Road, Kelsey Street,
Yeah.
Payne Road, that little,
little burial
historic
ground.
cemetery, that's zoned R12.
Okay, so they're
But
right
in
there.
reality, who's gonna be digging that up?
Well, oh, right, exactly. But, I mean, we don't have a
Never know.
historical zone. So, just to kind of,
Hold together.
again, just to tighten things up, just to be consistent.
Okay.
It just makes more sense to have it instead of residential, and to have it as open space, in the way we're thinking it.
Yeah,
Just
I
like
don't
the
see that,
parks.
because I don't see the stuff digging these things up.
You never know. Yeah, they may want to move. Might not look like a location anymore.
Thank you very much for your hard work on this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else you want to add? You're all set? Okay, you know what you got to do, bring it back to us the next meeting, we'll review it, and then we'll schedule for a public hearing.
Thank you very much.
Your
You're
final
welcome.
meeting in April.
Huh?
It won't be till your final meeting in April.
That's
Just not
fine,
me.
whenever you bring it back, we will review it and move it along.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That one might.
Okay, where are we here? Okay, moving right along, old business, there's none, petitions for public hearing scheduling, petition 0707, you wanna read it, please? It's number 10.
Petition number 07-07, special permit, section 3.2.7, charitable event at 2550 Berlin Turnpike. Melanie Goodwin applicant, Fernandez Real Estate LLC owner. Melanie Goodwin, 66 Highview Avenue, Weathersfield, Connecticut, contact.
Just give us a real quick overview of what it is, you've already done that, but just,
Okay,
and
well,
then we'll move it along.
yeah, the letter is just 2 paragraphs, so if you don't mind, I'll just read.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, on Friday, June 9th, from 6 to 9 p.m., after close of business, Turnpike Motors Auto Body at 2550 Berlin Turnpike wishes to host a fundraiser for K9CS Incorporated, K9 Crime Stoppers. K9 Crime Stoppers is a 501c3 public funded charity, quote, puppies to police dogs. We raise, train, and donate police and search and rescue dogs to communities in need. Turnpike Motors has a long history of donating time, money, and resources to a large variety of community events and charities. Most recently, they were partner for the K9 Awareness Week initiative created in the memory of K9 Thor, killed in the line of duty. The mission of K9 Crime Stoppers is to provide not only the canines, but the training, consultation, and education advancements of K9 teams, particularly in the greater Hartford region. The planned event is a Pints for Puppies beer and wine tasting event. We've partnered with Bev Max of Weathersfield and their distributors to donate all alcohol, and local restaurants will be donating catered snacks. Tickets will be sold prior to the event for $20. Parking will be in the lot and on the property. Newington Chief of Police and Newington Fire Chief have signed our liquor permit to date.
This is this is the only event that I've seen that fits the 3.2.7 that's come before this commission. To be perfectly honest with you, it's a charitable event, because there's some that have come under the guise of this section, and there's no way close to meeting the regulation as it's written. So, I suggest we put it on for the next meeting.
Yep, April 13th.
Okay, and, hopefully we could act on it and let them go. Right. Any questions on this? Looks like a pretty good thing. Okay. Town planners report.
Okay, I have an update on the situation with Cedar Mountain stone and mulch. They have submitted their application for site plan approval. I went out there today to take a photograph of what's there, but for some reason the photos wouldn't upload from my camera. But what happened was, I don't know, six or 7 months ago, the operators of that business installed a couple of white plastic hoop houses, which was a zoning violation, and they either have always been or they exacerbated their outside storage of material, which is a zoning violation in Weathersfield. They were cited by Weathersfield for these violations, and what the owners of the business did was, instead of coming into compliance with the regulation, they went to the ZBA to get variances, and the ZBA in Weathersfield granted them the 2 variances, but that made it allowable to have a 16-foot hoop house. That made it allowable to store material outdoors. They still have to come before the Weathersfield Planning and Zoning Commission to get a special permit to do these things. As I explained, it lets them come in the door to ask, but Weathersfield still has to make a decision on it. Now, in Weathersfield, they streamline these things. When an application for a special permit comes in, the staff reviews it. If it's substantially complete, the staff schedules the public hearing. It doesn't come to the commission the way it is here, where you take a look at the application before it gets scheduled. In Weathersfield, the staff has the authority to do that. And the public hearing has been scheduled for Wednesday, Tuesday, April 2nd, April 3rd, whatever that Tuesday is. And I have the site plan. I don't think that it's attractive. It's Newington's front yard. And I think that I imagine that the Newington Planning and Zoning Commission might want to have some say in that. Now, I want to be careful here, because tonight is a special meeting, and you can't act on anything on a special meeting. I would suggest, feel free to talk about it, but don't take any action tonight. And I can discuss this with the chairman after the meeting tomorrow to see what the chairman would like to do, if anything, about this.
We all know with the piece of properties, it's the front door to Newington. It's in Weathersfield, but it makes it look like Newington is, you're coming into Newington into the junkyard.
Excuse me. I'm gonna recuse myself from this, because, he's a competitor and I have a material yard, and I don't think it's fair for me to sit on here, and for those reasons, I'm gonna excuse myself. Thank you.
Good. Okay. Bob?
No, I agree with everything the town planner said. It is our front door. It's not attractive. It doesn't make us look good. Personally, I don't think it makes them look good either. So I think we should do whatever we can to make our feelings known to the Westfield TP&Z.
The problem too is that this is right next to where we're trying to develop one of the biggest pieces of property that we got left in the town. That's so visible to everybody. The Amara piece. I mean, it's not going to be. It would be better if we could control it more than it is.
Commissioner Aida, I'm going to recuse myself also because I do business with him.
Okay.
See you tomorrow.
Knocking him off here real good. You got any problems with it, Mike? Okay. You got any comments on it?
No, but you're right about Weathersfield. I mean, it goes through their offices and it's done. It's done before it even gets to a hearing. West Hartford does the same thing. So their commissioners don't really have any hands on other than, here you go, you're going to vote on it tonight. And that's the way it is in a lot of towns.
Chris?
I'm also a contractor, does business up there. But my greater question is, this has been a business that's been in operation for over 15 years at that location in its configuration. The hoop house is at least 5 years, at least. The only addition was they took some, I don't know if it was leased or purchased property to the north and expanded their storage yard, and I think it was an attempt to increase their buying power. But eyesore, I'll give you that. I do agree to that point, but I don't know how you could.
Well, obviously, the officials in Weathersfield see that there was a problem because they cited them. So apparently they see it as some type of an overstep of or maybe it got to the point that it kept growing to the point where they feel maybe now is the time they got to stop them or reel them in a little bit. But I don't know. As far as Newington's concerned, as far as this commission is concerned, I could just see us doing that next to Berlin or Weathersfield, how fast they would be in here, complaining to us. And they've done it in the past when we've had stuff on the property, on the town lines, where they weren't shy about telling us their feelings. I don't see it as a plus to the town of Newington. And if we have the opportunity to state our case at the meeting and tell them how we feel, that it's an eyesore and it's overstepped. They got product right to the property line. They got product probably over the property line in the right of ways. Bob?
The only thing I wanted to add is I will say a couple of years ago I did go to one of their meetings actually with then Commissioner Anist for the subdivision that they were doing.
Yep.
And when they get something at their meetings, they act that night. Nothing's held over. Nothing's, everything is done that night at that meeting. So I think if we're going to send something, if we're going to act on this, we do need to do it because they will act that night if they hold true to form.
Well, I think I don't know the politics there, what they're doing, but I think we have a duty to go there and present our case as the town of Newington. Our front doors, has this eyesore and this overstepping of the bounds of what you're doing on a piece of property. We should at least let them know if this is a done deal and that's what it is, but we should at least have the opportunity to go there and tell them that the way that we feel. Don't you think, Mr. Planner? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I got a feel for what we're going to do.
The next item was Chick-fil-A. I did meet with the applicants, and they've prepared a site plan. They'll be submitting it probably to be received at your next meeting. They're tearing down the old Ruby Tuesday. It's a scrape and rebuild. The new building will actually be slightly smaller than the old one. And then I have nothing new on the 333 Berlin Turnpike property, the what we call the former Eversource property. We've had a couple meetings with them. Oh, I did extend to them an invitation to run their approvals concurrently. I did not hear back from them, but I'll make sure that the invitation was received. Yep. And I don't believe they have applied yet for their wetlands permit because I would have heard that. So I think they're still working with with the State Traffic Commission trying to get approval for the traffic light that they want. I think that's what the
traffic light.
Well, they want to put a new one. Yeah, they want to put a new one. Yes. Yeah, just a little bit north of the driveway to Best Buy.
Geez, they'd have a light within 50 feet of the Payne Road intersection. Right. Traffic light.
That's probably why they're having some trouble with the with DOT.
It's a state highway. They have the control over it, but I'm not a traffic engineer, and I can see without even. I know that particular piece of property that you're within 100. That's not even 100 feet. You wouldn't even get queuing. You wouldn't even get queuing at the Payne Road light. You'd be into their intersection. I don't know. Maybe that's why you haven't heard anything.
I'm afraid so.
Yep.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay. Any questions for the town planner at this point? Anything about his report? Okay. Moving forward, communications, and you got any communications?
No, just the usual from CROG, but you get them. I forward them to you as soon as I receive them.
Stanley?
Yes, we had a CROG meeting last week, and several issues came up. One was the crumbling foundations issue, which they were going to put some legislation through. I'm not sure if it passed or not. They were going to try to tack on a surcharge onto the insurance policies to put into a general fund to help these people out. The average cost of repairing those homes anywhere from $150,000 to $250,000 for remediation. So I have the literature here if you want that. The other thing that was discussed was that CROG has put together its own set of contractors for bids, and they would, if the town was interested, they could get a hold of them to try to piggyback on their bids like they do with the state. So when basically, I'm sure everybody is aware of it, but I'll go over it. If the state puts out the bid for 9-ton trucks, and the time they get a bid from, they get the approval for the bid from the contractor. Then what happens is the towns can piggyback on and buy the 9-ton trucks at the same price the state does. So CROG has decided to start their own. So there is a contact up there if you want. I'll give these to Craig.
Good, thank you.
And that was about it. The other one that came out that I found was interesting was West Hartford. It made news the other day. Was they're revamping their area to look for food service trucks to put in an area. I asked Lynn Pike DeSantos for a copy of it, and I've got it at home. I just haven't been busy. Haven't had time to read it, but might be something. I know we had discussed the food truck areas in town. I can't remember when. We might want to just to see what they're doing in that area. Just maybe we could tighten our regulations up a little bit. It's only a thought.
What I know about it is that they're talking about only an industrial zone, and they want to put it, at their stepchild, New Park Avenue. And so they want to put it in an area that they don't, because you don't see it close to anywhere near the center or anything else. So they put it on the outskirts, always in the Elmwood section in New Park Avenue. So it has to be in an industrial zone. So that's all I can say about that. I mean, if we already have the regulation that allows street vendors in certain areas, and most of those are industrial zones. So
no, I'm just suggesting that we just, anytime someone comes out, look to see what they have. Maybe there's something we missed and just maybe tweak it a little bit. I'm not saying to do exactly what they're doing.
yeah,
I would not want to see them in any other areas than what we've already designated for them. But these are food trucks under the regulation of the police department.
And there's just only a certain number, and there's only certain locations.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, bring that in. I'd like to look at it.
I'll email it. I'll email it to you because I got it from her.
Yeah, please.
And the other one, it was a couple also is in Simsbury. There's an issue about auxiliary apartments they're looking at. Some people want to try to split their houses up and rent one half the house up and say as make it a 2-family house in a single family zone. And Simsbury's been denying them. So just to let you know.
To do that in the town of Newington, it'd have to be in an R7 zone. That's the only zone that would allow a duplex type house. So in most of those areas that are R7 zones already have duplex communities on them. So someone like in an R12 zone to split their property wouldn't fit the zone because it's not an allowed use in an R12 or an R20 zone. I don't know how it would never affect us because it would never.
They came in under the accessory apartment venue, and then they started with that. So
we have regulations that regulate the accessory apartment.
Right, we limit the size of them.
Yeah. Yep. And the egress, and there's a little checklist of stuff that they have to do.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Next item is public participation. Anyone wants to speak, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Okay, seeing none, remarks by commissioners? John, anything?
No, not at this time, thank you.
All set. I have no closing remarks. Ask for a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so we're just set this
Right.
up.
Okay, and our next meeting is Thursday, April 13th.